All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the show. Today we have Zacc Call, who is the president of Capita Financial Network, a wealth management firm that focuses on building lasting relationships with individuals, families, and business owners through comprehensive financial planning. So with that, welcome in.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we talked, I had Mike Littledyke on the show several months ago, and so full circle to have you on as well, and glad we could get you on.
Yeah, you did it in the right order. That's good. I mean, it's probably hard to follow him a bit, but this is good.
Yeah, I'm excited. So first question I always ask, Zacc, is to talk a little bit about your upbringing. So childhood, teenage years, just those formative years, any influences or things that you recall that helped mold you into who you are today?
Sure. Okay, so I grew up in Farmington, Utah, and my parents are a little bit unique in that I think they're quite different people, the two of them, but they make a great marriage work. And so my dad is a high-performing, high-execution, analytical, perfectionist type. And my mom is a person who just loves people and doesn't really stress about numbers. So they could not be more different in that regard. And all of us kids got a little mix I have 4 siblings. I'm the 4th of 5. And we each got a little bit of a mix of it. I think I ended up with a little more of the analytical, a little bit more of the drive side of it, and then I have to work on the personal skills side to connect with people a little bit better. But anyway, those are my parents. And then I've listened to your podcast, and it seems like there's a lot of common themes here that, well, maybe this is just us growing up here, but I had a pretty good childhood, like I enjoyed it. I did know that my dad got paid every other Tuesday because the groceries in the cabinet, like the pantry, like I knew that I could make sandwiches a little bit easier on Wednesday after he got paid than the Monday before he got paid. There were times but at the same time, you look back and we had plenty and it was totally fine. You learn later on in life how bad some people really had it, and you realize, oh, it was pretty decent for us. And so I had a good childhood, grew up in Farmington. Always loved math, and I loved people, and I loved strategy. I loved design. So usually, like in classes, I loved anything that had to do with art, math, and engaging with people. And really, really struggled with things like reading comprehension, spelling, and your typical English related. I only learned later that I enjoyed that stuff. It took me at least 20, 25 years to finally get into all of that. But yeah, I mean, I was very polarized in terms of the classes I liked as well.
Yeah, makes sense. And so coming out of high school, your college experience, did you attend Westminster? Is that right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that experience. I always like to get into people's minds about their approach into college. I mean, coming from your childhood and having the experiences that you had, what was like, the thought process? I want to get a good job. I want to do something entrepreneurial. How did you think about that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of your guests, I'm really impressed with a lot of your guests, how much they knew they wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just wanted to perform. I just wanted to do good things for people, and I wanted to create, but I didn't know, and I don't know if I would necessarily consider myself the entrepreneur. I work for a business, and I'm helping grow it. So let me get back to what you asked, though. I started going to Weber State and got my associates from Weber State. And my wife was, at the time we started dating, she was at Weber State as well. But the two of us played soccer together in like co-ed indoor leagues. And we've known each other since I was in 7th grade, just because we both played a lot of competitive soccer. And we were always at tournaments or things together. But when I say together, not together, but, both of our teams were playing in the tournaments. So we were both at Weber State. I got my associates there. And I wanted to transfer to a different school because I knew I wanted to do something in either business, architecture, or engineering. And I didn't feel like the programs at Weber State were the best ones for me to maybe had the best reputation. And that's the interesting thing, is I actually think their programs are great. There's so many misconceptions I had, Chase, growing up that
we all do.
I mean, so many things that I missed, but that was probably one of them. So I went to the University of Utah my goal was I would get a bachelor's in business administration, because I had decided I was going to go into architecture. So I would get a bachelor's in business administration, and then they had a program where you could, if you had a bachelor's in anything, you could do 3 more years and get a master's in architecture. And if you want to be an architect, you have to get a master's degree, and then you have to pass, at the time, it was 7 additional exams that, after you had a master's degree. So I was looking at that path, but also knowing that I wanted to manage a business. So I didn't necessarily think I need to own my own business, but I knew I wanted to make decisions that would be both like structural design and strategic design of a company. So I decided it was going to be architecture because I also liked design. And then I took a job as a runner at an architectural firm. It was Architectural Nexus. And my job was basically, and this makes me feel pretty old to say this, but this was all paper. I mean, I was hauling huge rolls of plans from the architect's office, and Architectural Nexus at the time was the 3rd largest in the state of Utah. So I was hauling huge rolls of plans from Architectural Nexus up to Huntsman Cancer Institute, and I would have dollies, and I'd be pushing them through the hospital and delivering them to a specific owner or project manager, or then maybe I would go get them and get them back to the architect for him to do revisions of it. And then I would take it to an engineer who would do revision. Anyway, so that was my job. And I got exposure to the world of architecture and the cyclical nature of it. And I also got exposure to how much debt a lot of the young architects had and how little money they were making at the same time. So there was this trade-off of they're not making enough money. They're deep in debt, a lot of them. And it was a 10 to 15-year path to become a principal at a lot of these firms. Another misconception, because there were many architects out there that ran their own businesses that did just fine, right? But my exposure to it was within this large architectural firm. And then all the while, by this time we were married. My wife and I had purchased a townhome. That was 2007, so it was wonderful timing right before the 2008 crash.
Sure.
So we purchased a townhome in 2007. And I had taken a pretty big pay cut to work at this architectural firm just for experience. And the bank account was getting smaller and smaller and smaller every month. So my wife and I had been married about 6 months. And in my mind, I just kind of knew, like, this is not going to work. And so in other words, I wish I could say like I had this great passion to do something else at the time. But like there was a little bit of survival mode going on at that moment where I realized, like, this path is going to make us sell our house, or, the bank account wasn't at 0 just yet, but I could see the writing on the wall, so I finally decided I had to do something different. And it's interesting though, I got a call from my wife, we'd only been married 6 to 9 months, and she called and told me, and she was crying on the phone. And I was like, okay, well, hold on, give me a second. So I ran to the stairwell. I'm like, what's going on, Michelle? And she's like crying, and she said, I just don't think this is going to work anymore. And I was devastated, because I'm thinking, we've only been married 6 months or so. Like, I know it's not easy. Everybody struggles a bit in marriage. That's what I'm thinking. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? It took me forever to get out of her. She was talking about the job. The marriage was fine. Yeah. I didn't know, but it took me a while. And finally she said, I just don't know if this architecture thing's going to work out. I said, oh, for sure. I know we have to, I'm totally going to pivot. I just haven't found a new job yet. So then her mom worked at Fidelity Investments, and she told us that you could get 90% tuition reimbursement if you worked at Fidelity. And so my thought was, I like people and I like math and I like strategy. The only thing it might be missing is a little bit of the design that I enjoyed. And I thought, let's give it a go. So I went and got a job at Fidelity, and then transferred to Westminster. Once again, this is another finance decision. At the time, the U of U cost about $1,500 a semester for tuition. And I know a lot of people will listen to that and think that's crazy low, but that was a lot for me at the time.
Sure.
And then books and fees and parking pass and everything were another $1,000 on top of that. Fidelity paid 90% of tuition, so they were paying 90% of $1,500, not 90% of the other $1,000.
Right.
And Westminster rolled all of their cost into tuition. They just had one flat tuition, and it was $5,000 a semester for tuition at Westminster. So Westminster actually only cost me $500 a month, because Fidelity paid $4,500. And then, so basically I went to Westminster for tuition reimbursement. I went to Fidelity for tuition reimbursement. So this whole journey began for tuition reimbursement, but then I fell in love, and we could talk about that later. But
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's kind of necessity pivoting, but also finding something that you were passionate about and that you liked. I think that's a great story because when you're young and you're married and you're figuring it out and seeing the bank account, those are some critical decision times and critical times to make the right steps to progress. So I love it. So you kind of talked about financial advisory, but it had some of the components that you liked. But when you found that role at Fidelity, how long did it take to understand like this is what I want to do? I really enjoy the financial side. I working with clients. Like, why did you end up sticking with that route?
yeah, that's fair. Okay, so in the beginning, I had a role where I was just answering phones and providing stock quotes, maybe helping place trades, servicing requests. So it was very service oriented, right? And they give you some training, and I soaked up the training. Like I really loved that you had to pass the Series 7 exam, and I didn't tell anybody this at the time, but I really liked that. I thought that was fun. And everybody else, it wasn't cool to think that was necessarily fun, right? But I really enjoyed learning about options and about stocks and about the different financial tools that existed out there and how they functioned. And to me, I love how the puzzle comes together. So I found that was fun, and I enjoyed talking to clients about it. And then I got a job. I got a promotion there. And a lot of this in the beginning, Chase, like a lot of this was just survival mode. I wasn't making much money, even at Fidelity. And I'm trying to figure out how to pay tuition. And we had a kid after a little bit. And so anyway, a lot of it was survival mode. And I got a promotion to work in their stock plan services. So now I got to strategize around stock options and restricted stock awards and employee stock purchase plans. And that was more fulfilling for me. All of a sudden now I could provide some guidance and tell someone something that makes their life better. And that was one of the first times I got the taste of, oh my gosh, if I obtain knowledge about finances, I can translate that into that person's life is better as a result of it. And that was a little bit of a hook in the line for me that got me deeper. So then the next job I got within Fidelity was in a group called Portfolio Advisory Services. And that's where Fidelity would manage the assets for individuals. And I was assigned as their specialist for the managed accounts. And I had about 2 or 3 jobs within that group, but all those jobs were the same, just at different asset levels. And the job was, now you're actually the point of contact for how the assets are managed in what portfolio strategy. Now, I wasn't picking funds and stocks. That was, Fidelity folks that had much more experience and much more tenure and were better analysts. They all did that. But I was the face and relationship for that. So I was able to help the client be in the right portfolio and help them understand what was going on in the portfolios and communicate strategy and allocation changes, and really enjoyed that because, once again, I was able to take an opportunity where I got to learn, because I loved education. I got to learn and then put that into someone else's life in a way that made their life better. It was wonderful, right? And then also I found that if I could help them a little bit on the side with knowing a little bit about taxes or a little bit about estate planning or make sure their beneficiaries were set up right, these people just loved you for that stuff. They loved you for caring about anything else other than what they paid you for. So that was fun as well. So it kept getting deeper and deeper. And then the next job I got was the branch financial advisor job. So that's where you are the financial advisor, and now you have the ability to basically be the main point of contact for a household and do their financial analysis and propose strategies and help them with their retirement plan. And so that was up till 2015. And then I don't know how much, do you want to talk more about Fidelity? I mean, I loved it there.
My next question was going to be the transition to Capita. I mean, when Mike was on here, said it wasn't easy to pry you because things were going pretty well, it sounds like. But what was that process like when you met Mike?
So Fidelity was interesting because we would say you bleed green. Like I bled as green as you could. Yeah. I just loved it there. And there were so many people that I got to know. I mean, in fact, I had a Fidelity friend pass away not too long ago, and at her funeral, it was a reunion of all of us old Fidelity coworkers, and there was so much love there. And I had a lot of fun opportunities to be part of different groups where I could give opinions, and they put me on a team, the customer experience ambassador, because I just was the type to always talk about, well, what if we did this a little different? Or what if we offered the service in this way instead of that way? And so they started, and they even sent me out to Boston once to like talk to the teams out there and give the voice of the customer to the folks making decisions. I thought that was a lot of fun. And then I got the branch job, and the branch job was really cool because it was let's put it this way, it was a broader conversation as to what types of topics you could discuss. But I felt I just wasn't great when you feel the sales pressure. I mean, the sales pressure was high. Let's just put it that way. I think it is in most jobs like that. And I found myself getting too lost in like, well, what if we did this or what if we did that? And I just wasn't, I mean, I performed just fine, but it wasn't, I felt like all of that passion I had for improving things was not valued as enough in that particular role. Now, there were roles at Fidelity and other places, but you'd have to move to Boston. You'd have to give, and I wasn't willing to do that either. So it just wasn't the right fit for me. And also the sales pressure was really, really high. And I'm not the best sometimes I'll over disclose. So if somebody is like, well, what are the pros and cons about that? I'll just lay it all out there. Yeah. And that's not necessarily the best salesperson either. Right. So anyway, I got a call from Mike, who I didn't know who he was. And it was like 6 p.m. after a really, really tough day. And I was still in my office. And it was one of those where normally you don't answer calls that you don't know the number, but I didn't look at the phone. I just answered it, picked it up. And I was kicking myself for having even answered the phone to somebody when I heard it was a recruiter, which I didn't know he wasn't a recruiter at the time, right? He's just a guy running a business that needed help. So I was like, I don't know. But I told him I didn't have time to talk, and he called me again, finally got me talking to him. And there was just something a little bit different about Mike and his energy level. And I guess that's the best I can describe, like, because in that role as the financial advisor in a branch for any of the big institutions like TD, which is now Schwab at the time, or Fidelity or Wells Fargo, you are recruited heavily. A lot of different firms out there know how to close business, you know how to find business, you know how to retain clients. It's like somebody else trained that person to a certain degree. You're recruited. And I never would take those calls, but something about Mike's positive energy drew me in. And I was sure glad I took the call, but I met with him and he basically said, I have no problem finding clients. I can easily network and find a lot of clients, but I need somebody to take care of them so that we can make good on the promises that we've made in our initial sales meetings. And that was like music to my ears. And then he offered me not enough money and I said no. So that was it. So then he called me back and he sat me down. He had a massage chair at his house. And it was so funny because if you guys know Mike at all, he was on this podcast before and he's so much fun. But it was so funny because he sat me down and we were hanging out at his house trying to decide, could we make this work? Could we negotiate a little bit better compensation? And we were sitting in 2 massage chairs at his house. And he seemed to be more concerned about the settings of the massage chair than he was about the conversation about compensation. Just his personality is so fun, right? Just so fun. And then I'm so analytical saying like, well, we got to get back to this. So finally we came together, got a number that I felt was worth it. And I decided to make the jump.
There you go. And your first role with Capita was as an advisor before the taking on the president role. And
Mm-hmm.
what was that transition those first couple of years?
So he basically needed somebody who was willing to take care of, do financial planning, help with the asset allocation decisions for portfolios, teach, what can we do on tax planning for these clients. And I came in and did that. We had about 300 households at the time. And Mike just kept finding clients. And I mean, his part of the process was scalable, right? Because he could find clients and then tell me to take care of them. And he could keep doing that forever. But as the household count grew and grew, I knew that the balloon would burst and there'd be no way for me to take care of it forever. So just out of like making sure it could continue, we had to come up with other solutions. And in addition to that, to me, I thought it was an amazing opportunity because sales and prospecting and networking is actually the most difficult aspect of our profession. And if Mike's comfortable with it and knows how to do it well, then I can find other financial advisors who are extremely passionate about doing right by a client and holistic financial planning. and we can marry those different personalities together. So in 2000, so I joined Capita in October of 2015. And then throughout the year of 2000 and end of 16 and throughout 17, I basically laid out to Mike, like, I think we should be doing this together. I think it should be a partnership. And then in January 1, 2018, Tyler Williamson had already joined Capita before me. He was another advisor. But in January 1 of 18, we formed a partnership with Mike, Tyler, and me. And then we created our own RIA, or Registered Investment Advisor firm, and rolled that up in April of 2018. And then shortly after that, Cassie, who has been at Capita longer than me, bought in as a partner as well. So then we had 4, and then hired my first advisor, Bart Wagstaff, and he was the 5th partner, and we've added as we've gone. So we now have 14 advisors if you don't include Mike and me, and about 40 employees.
Wow. That's amazing. And I didn't appreciate that. We didn't talk about all the details with Mike, but the structure with 4 partners, that's really interesting. I guess, how did your mindset change when you became a partner, you know, coming from Fidelity and kind of in that role? I mean, was there a mindset shift and like, now I'm part of this? And,
sure.
And what was the mentality?
For sure. So this is a little bit of backstory, but like, my wife and I are both ineligible for life insurance because she's had a brain tumor and I've had cancer.
Oh, wow.
So to me, I needed to build wealth as fast as possible in case I died, because that is my wife's life insurance on me, is whatever assets I can accumulate. And I have accidental, but like from a health standpoint, you know, the institutions don't love to hear the word cancer in any way.
Sure.
Even though mine's fine, it's thyroid cancer and usually doesn't cause you that many problems. So my mentality was, I need to build something, and I need to build something as fast as we can, and it needs to produce both income and an enterprise value. So a lot of financial advisors may build lifestyle practices, but I was also looking to build something with enterprise value, which is a different mentality. Like if you're a partner and you're building an enterprise that has value, you sacrifice income in the current year for extra employees or extra software or extra processes and time that you spend on things that don't make you any money today and may not ever make you money from an income standpoint ever. But the valuation of your firm is going to be worth more if you have the right documented processes and structure and technology in place. So that's one way. I think if you're a partner, you start to look at the business a little bit differently and say, well, this doesn't make me money this month or next quarter on any bonus, but if I teach this peer of mine how to do something the right way and they can spread it to 3 or 4 more people, then there's scale in that, and you start to think differently. It was also just a marriage that needed to happen in order for Mike and I and a few others to just feel like let's just all go in the same direction and push as hard as we can. And I felt like alignment of interest in terms of like equity and part. It's not equal equity, but
Sure.
At least having a seat at that table for all of us was something that kind of puts you facing the same direction and pushing as hard as you can.
Yeah, I love that. And I can resonate well. I've been an employee and I've been now an entrepreneur or an owner, right? And it does shift that to the next gear, I feel like, in a lot of ways. And to your point, Zacc, about systems and processes, I want to dig in a little bit more there, because I think the temptation for a lot of entrepreneurs or those starting off is to have more of a lifestyle business. You know, you get into the driver's seat and you're like, well, maybe I could just have 2 employees and clip whatever I'm going to clip every year and have a nice life. But I think to your point about enterprise value, that's kind of the end game. So how have you guys, what are some of the things that you've been able to do to try to differentiate yourself? Because to your point, there's a lot of wealth management firms that have 2 individuals with their licenses and 30 clients or 100 clients, and they're just kind of doing their thing. I guess what were some of the things that you did?
Gosh, that's a good question. And the fair thing to say, especially with investment advisors, is I actually think the lifestyle practice is not a bad way to go, as long as you take a decent amount of that income and invest in some form or fashion, whether it's real estate or in portfolios you manage that help you grow assets. So once again, like, hopefully as I say these things, I hope nobody takes it as, well, that's what he thinks is the only way. I think that in fact, I think solo practitioners oftentimes can deliver an incredible service as well, because they may be able to do it to fewer clients for the same revenue. You get the idea, right?
Yeah.
But to answer your question, you have to pay people who are non-revenue producing, and that feels awful. That is just the awful aspect of it, right? At the beginning, you're like, why?
Yeah.
Why would I pay that person that doesn't bring in any new assets, that doesn't assist with the new account processing, they're non-revenue producing, but they're revenue protecting. So that's a part of the game at that point, right? And then you also have to, it's hard to check your ego a little bit. You want to be the guy, you want to be the girl, you want to be the person that knows it all, right? And be the one that gets the credit for it all. And if you're trying to build something of value, it's best, the least dependent they are upon you, the more valuable the situation is, right? So I think the processes you put in place are people first. You hire people. I mentioned Cassie. You hire someone like Cassie, who is our chief operating officer, that then can create structure in terms of, like, if somebody does something once, it needs to be documented. If it's ever going to be done again, it gets documented. And we're in the process right now of building an entire internal website. We do things. Let me start over. We're building an internal website that has all of our processes documented, our strategies on how we execute various aspects of the business, like how is our marketing strategy executed? How is our hiring process executed? Like, so many aspects of the business are going to be documented with quick reference tables and cheat sheets to be able to find them quickly and get things done quickly. That's the type of thing that a firm with multiple hundreds of people should do.
Mm-hmm.
And Cassie and her team, and then I try on my side to think, if we had 200 employees, what would you do? Even though we thought that way when we only had 20. And that, I think, is probably the advice. So I'll try to be shorter and say, just any decision you make, does that decision make sense for a company with 10 times the employees that you have, or 10 times the volume that you have? If so, then you're on the right path to building the right systems. If you are doing something that, if you had to do it for 10 times the employees, then that's a problem. I already know I have a problem in how I calculate compensation. Like, the way that I do compensation is an extremely manual process, and I haven't quite figured out the software yet to fix that problem. So let's just expose me for a minute on that. There's a problem I have. I cannot do that for 200 advisors, for example. Don't need to today, but I need to create the scale for that in the future. It's a project on the table, but I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, I think that's so good. And in our business, I've been getting a little bit obsessed lately with what you mentioned: standard operating procedures, systematizing things. If you're going to do it twice, it should be written down. And then delegation. I think delegation is such a challenging thing to do in a newer business or as an owner, because you have that ownership mentality. And if someone can only do it 50% as well as you can, it's tough to kind of, give the reins up. And so I think that's all really, really great and sound advice, because I've seen the billboards. I've seen you guys are different. I've noticed, like, I drive up and down the I-15. It's like, there's Capita there. Like, you don't really see that from anybody else in the state, in the financial advisory world or RIA world. So kudos to you guys. You're doing it right. I did want to ask a little bit about, AUM. Mike mentioned this when he was on, but when you guys are outgrowing your business and scaling your AUM and your clientele, what have been some successful strategies that you've seen with the advisors you work with? How are they getting dollars in the door? How are those conversations going?
Yeah, I'm convinced that if you take a financial advisor and if you make them better at tax planning, and you make them better at estate planning, you make them better at cash flow analysis, you teach them more about Social Security strategies and how Medicare works, and then a lot of them come to us with a good investment knowledge. So I hope that, don't take that away as saying, like, Capita doesn't focus on that, but a lot of them come to us with a really, like, people from JP Morgan, Creative Planning, Fidelity, Fisher, Boss, like all these different firms out there. They come with a pretty decent investment knowledge. But if we can improve that and then really build out the rest, I'm convinced that clients see it and they feel it and it's different, and then they just give you more money and they give you friends. And so that's priority one. We get about 70% of our new assets every year from either a client making a referral of one of their friends or a client adding their own additional money to their own assets that we already manage. So that's a big number. And it's crazy to me that it's great. It's great that it's so big, but the amount of effort that we put in to get the other 30% feels just outsized, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we spend so much, you mentioned the billboards, like there's so much time and effort that goes into so many different avenues of marketing. And the reality is, if you're just really good and you try to stand out on the actual service offering, that's what really drives most of it.
Yeah.
But you maybe wanted to know more about when it comes to the other 30%, it's a lot of public education. I do a podcast every 2 weeks and push a lot of information to just free and try to be zero sales pressure, zero product push, so that people never feel like I'm getting sold something or the other. It's just pure education. We do usually about somewhere around 70 to 100 in-person or webinar presentations, of which usually 30 to 50, actually closer to 50, are going to be more on like the retirement income, Social Security, Medicare, the decisions right around that transition point for retirement. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think it was about 50 Social Security, so it's got to be closer to 100 total. Anyway, that just getting a lot of free education out there to people, eventually we find people will call us 8-9 years later and say, hey, I listened to a presentation years ago. So we feel value add marketing works, and then taking care of clients works. And then the rest is just good relationships with people who are in ancillary businesses. If you know somebody who values businesses for a profession, then it makes sense to get to know them and make sure that you can have a reciprocal referral relationship where, okay, I've got a client who needs a business valuation for a stock donation to a donor advised fund. Can you help us with that at a reasonable cost? And then at the same time, if they ever run into somebody that doesn't have a financial advisor that needs somebody, then that could be an introduction. So they just call that centers of influence. You try to cultivate as many people and share the story of what you do with as many people as possible. But I think the first step is you have to be different. You have to do something a little better than other people do. And we don't do everything better than other people. There are a lot of other firms that do things better than us, but if you can be good or a little bit better in something unique that a subset of clients needs, then that's, I think, where you'll find people.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And to your main point, I think leading with value and leading with education, and even if it takes 5-7 years to get someone, it's that constant value. It's a constant drip on them and your name being out there. And so I think that's great. I did want to ask, when it comes to your client size, I don't know if there is a different strategy or what your typical client is investing with Capita, but if it's a $200,000 client versus the $25 million client or the $50 million client, is there a different strategy when it comes to attracting those types of individuals when they're maybe a little bit more sophisticated or institutional?
For sure. Oh yeah, for sure. Those people talk totally different languages. The person with $200,000 oftentimes is just excited that someone's talking to them at all.
Sure.
And that they're not pushing them into some product that's either high commission and then they'll disappear, right? So the competitors in that lower end space are it's hard to make money in our industry on somebody that has $50,000, $100,000. I actually think we lose money on clients under. It's hard to attribute exact staff time to each household, right? That's why I say I think. But I know that if you average everything out, we lose money on clients under a certain amount, and we have a lot of them. So we purposefully do that because it feels good to take care of those people and know that they're not being pushed into things that they shouldn't get. And we're okay even if it either breaks even or is slightly under, because a lot of those people need it, one, and two, they end up giving us referrals for other clients. So the language is totally different. They're just happy someone is helping. And if you work from the low end to the high end in terms of the hierarchy of needs of a client, at the very beginning, they're asking you, just help me not run out of money. Mm-hmm. And then the next step up as they get more in assets, they're saying, can you help me invest a little bit better? And then the next step up is, I really need some tax help. And by the way, as you work up, everything under this should be included, right? So you still have to help these people who want tax help know they're not going to run out of money. It's the peace of mind conversation, right? And you still need to help them invest better. But now you also need to throw on tax services and tax planning and tax strategy. And then the next tier up as they get, so let's give you some numbers. So it seems like somebody with $450,000, well, let's call it $400,000 or $500,000, they start to all of a sudden care a lot more about the efficiency of their investments. But below there, they're just like, just please don't help me. Just please don't. I just don't want to run out. That's it. That's all they care about. So that's the line. Now, I'm generalizing like dramatically, right? People are so different. Then the line between $500,000 to $1 million, let's call it $500,000, and the beginnings of that, they really want better investments. Before you hit $750,000 to $1 million in like investable assets is what we're talking about. So not including people's homes.
Sure.
They're looking for tax strategies. And if you are not delivering some sort of tax advice or tax planning before you run into clients with $1 million, I think you're missing the boat. And those clients are going to look for that tax advice somewhere else. And most of the time, their CPAs are looking in the rearview mirror because they're so swamped. They're just trying to file all the taxes before the deadline. What that means is your competitor's going to start talking taxes with that person. So you need to, right? Then when you get to $1 million to 3, 4, 5 million, it's about estate planning and how do I organize this so that it goes to the right people, is easy to transfer after I die, is easy to be taken care of if I'm incapacitated and can't think, or maybe I just can't even move, can't get to the place, who's going to help me. So that's estate planning. Once again, still have to be doing tax, still have to be doing investments, still have to help them understand we're not going to run out of money. And then as we get up into the 4 to 20 million, all of a sudden it's everything on the other side of this is given, but now they're expecting you to help them not ruin their family. That's all that matters at this point. They know they're not going to run out of money. They know that they deserve good tax planning based on the amount of fees they may pay. They know their investments should be better. They're kind of expecting all of that to just work. You better be good at that stuff or you're going to get let go. But now the additional value they want is, I don't want to ruin my kid. How do I avoid that? Or how do I take what I care about in life and how much wealth I have and marry those two things together so that I actually accomplish what I care about versus them being in different silos and never connecting. So the connecting money and value is usually the next step. And then once you get above that, then it starts to become more of a family office. Like, what can you do for me to make my life easier so that, like, pay all my bills, walk my dog, like take care of everything for me.
Yeah.
And for Capita, we basically, those are a couple lines that we've drawn in the sand where we've said, all right, we don't want to pay your bills and we're going to focus on what we're good at. That's probably not what we're good at. We're not going to walk the dog. That's not what we're good at either. But these other areas where we specialize, and we have clients that are, just starting off with very little, and that's okay. And we bet on people all the time, and we're happy to have a long-term relationship and have people in the $20+ million range. And so it's pretty widespread.
Yeah, so good. And I'm hearing a recurring theme of taxes being so critical. And that's something that to your point about CPAs, we've talked with our CPA and they're great, but a lot of times it's like year end and da-da-da. But I think it is, and we should talk more about having like that strategic advisor who can look at it holistically, like how does your business integrate with your personal wealth and how can we think about taxes? So that's awesome. What's next for Capita? I guess where are you guys currently right now on AUM, and then what are you hoping to accomplish here in the next little bit?
We manage about $1.4 billion in assets over 2,200 households. If you do the math, $800,000 average balance roughly. I mean, that's not quite, but so that's a lot of people. My personal mission is to deliver superior wealth management, financial planning to as many households as possible. Now, that's not necessarily like Capita's motto, but that's what I'm striving for. If I can deliver a superior wealth management experience, like you said, better tax planning, better estate, better investments, better cash flow to as many households. Like if we can get to 10,000 as fast as possible, that's success. So that's great. Let's do it. And so that is done through additional advisors, because you can't overload an advisor or else the client gets neglected. So you have to manage the household count per advisor. And yet those advisors, as they get really good, have a lot to share with other advisors. So there's a really interesting puzzle that I haven't quite fully solved, but we keep working on. So what's next is we're in Sandy. We're building a building in in Draper, and we'll have enough space finally for all of us. We've got people bunking up with each other in offices, and we're tight, and it's okay. It's working, but we'll have enough space for all of us. And I think there are some strategic partnerships that we can use to potentially get access to more client base to be able to basically spread that good planning to as many households as possible. But I think my guess is the next steps are an office in Davis County, an office in Utah County, an office in Washington County down south, then an office maybe in Vegas, and an office in Phoenix, an office in Idaho Falls. Like that would be ideal. We have home office being built right now, and it's big enough to be home office. And then I think it's time to then look at satellite offices and start to make it a little bit easier. We still have a lot of people that like to meet in person, even though, COVID changed that to a lot more by Zoom. We still have a lot of people that love to come in. And I think also inserting an advisor into a community means that they can actually do more good within that community, teach more, educate more financially, and then also have a better base for finding clients in that area. So I think there's an advantage to like physical locations beyond the one that we have. But we also have such like a fun culture that it's a little scary for us all. We've been reluctant to do that because we have such a, we get to see everyone every day. They're all in the same place. So that's been a little bit tricky.
Yeah, well, I've no doubt you guys will get there. That's exciting. And I drive by and I see the office under construction. I think Thrive is building that for you guys. So that'll be great. You mentioned the podcast, the Financial Call, and how often are you doing that? Or is it
comes out every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks. Okay. It's great. If anyone's listening, for those listening, go check it out because it's awesome free advice. I did want to just ask a couple things that I've thought about as a business owner or someone who's striving to build wealth. But when you think about income planning for somebody who wants to retire early, if somebody's in that building stage or they're earlier in their career and they're like, hey, I want to be done by 50 or 55. I mean, what have you seen other than a massive exit, that have been kind of the things to help people get invested, be thoughtful, be programmatic, to be able to, get out of, I guess, the rat race earlier than 65?
Oh my gosh, such a good question. So you're talking about the person that's not, let me clarify if that's all right, Chase.
Yeah,
so
sure. And it's long-winded.
No, it's a great question. I just want to make sure I answer it right. Are we talking about how does the person who doesn't, you mentioned a big exit. So if we take that off the side, you didn't start a business and exit a business with a whole bunch of money.
Right.
So that leaves people who maybe run a business, but it ends up being either a lifestyle practice or creates a decent amount of income, but not a huge exit. Or then people who work for a larger company and learn and get a decent amount of income. Those are the routes we're talking about, right? Yep. And the question is, okay, how does that individual from ages 25 to 40 find, a financial success to be able to maybe retire early?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You got it.
So this is really tricky because a lot of the financial advisors will talk to you all about spending less than you make. And I'd like to make sure people think about it in reverse. I think you should make more than you spend. So I know that that's a little bit of a nuance, but if you're making $60,000 a year and you're going to have multiple children and that is the income you're going to try to figure out how to live on, I'm not trying to disparage anyone's financial situation, but I'm just saying it, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 a year with 3 or 4 or 5 children can be extremely difficult. And as a financial advisor, if I'm sitting across the table from someone like that and they're trying to figure out how to get ahead, I'm as baffled as they are. I'm saying, yeah, I'm not sure how you're going to do it either. Because between the cost of housing today and the cost of kids' activities and even just the regular costs of getting a kid to and from school and the clothes and things they need, I can't figure that out either. So you got to play more offense at that point. So the first piece of advice for a 25 to 40-year-old is invest in ways to make more money. Invest in ways that up, whether it's your education, your credentials, your potential for promotion, your side hustle, your whatever this is that plays more offense. You're going to play defense later on. You're going to have to really, I coach a lot of competitive soccer and, we talk about parking the bus. You're up 2-0, there's 10 minutes left in a soccer match. You can really make it difficult on a team to score if you really kind of crowd and compress the game and cut off passing lanes. But you're later in life is the time to play more defense. But at 25 years old, you have to play a formation that throws a couple strikers up top. You have to, or else the easiest and surest way to lose a soccer game is to start the match in defensive mode. You're basically going to ask them to keep knocking the door until the ball hits the net. So in other words, going back to that, that's the focus first, is hit the offensive side of it. Second, understand what you're worth. So understand your replacement cost. And we know, and this is scary for me to say because I'm a business owner, but a lot of people actually end up making more money from moving from institution to institution, right? And I really, really hope at our firm to do a good job of valuing who people are and what they do and how hard it is for us to replace them and making sure that their income matches that. But I know a lot of firms don't. So sometimes if you think if you find yourself in one of those situations, understanding your replacement cost is an important leverage tool for you. So I haven't said anything about, hey, you should be doing a Roth or you should be doing a 401k. I mean, this is all offense. You have to play offense. And then after that, I have something, you mentioned maybe talking about some habits, but like the fake paycheck is a concept that in one of my episodes I talk about. And this is what finally made it so that I could budget, but I hate budgeting. I hate budgeting. It's the worst. I'd rather be more creative and design and meet people and create more income and play more offense, but you still have to spend less than you make, right? So the way that I do it is I set up 2 bank accounts and create an automatic transfer from one to the other and have all my income hit bank 1. And then I create a fake paycheck from bank 1 to bank 2, and all of our expenses come out of bank 2. And literally use 2 different banks on purpose to create a little bit of a barrier between those so I can't see them, the bank 1, when I'm living off of bank 2. And I also do it that way so that there's a little more friction for me if I have to pull more money over. It's an event. It's like a thought process. I have to move money between banks rather than just between accounts. So, James Clear in Atomic Habits talks a lot about the process of creating the right habits and putting friction in front of bad habits. And to me, that's the idea is people will spend what they make. So rather than trying to fight the self-motivation concept of trying to spend less, I'm just going to change how much I make by creating a fake paycheck.
Sure.
So step 1, play more offense. Step 2, create a fake paycheck and then spend everything that you decide is your fake paycheck. Now your funnel account over here, now it's time you can finally start investing something. And you can finally start to think about, am I going to set up retirement accounts and diversified portfolios? Am I going to try to buy a piece of real estate property, like a rental property? But that's all like tertiary to the idea of offense. And then and I'm not saying you have to do the fake paycheck. That's my method because I'm lazy. It's the lazy man's budgeting tool. But you have to do offense, then you have to figure out. So it's make more than you spend, and then later figure out how to spend less than you've made.
Yep.
Now you figure out how to invest.
So good. And just on that fake paycheck, so do you take like, hey, here's my monthly spend, mortgage, utilities, car, all that, and you have a number, and then every month it's like paycheck hits, you transfer that number over? Is that, or like it's like whatever, 10 grand, you're popping it over?
Yeah. So I can tell you like what we did was, and we've changed this over the years, and my wife and I decide collectively what we think the fake paycheck should be. Mm-hmm. And we set up a weekly transfer because that's how, people get paid every 2 weeks or every week or whatever. We mimicked that.
Got it.
So all of my income hits bank 1, call it the funnel account.
Yep.
And then weekly we moved at the beginning, I think it was $1,500 a week over. Mm-hmm. So that's $6,000 a month.
Yep.
And it was super easy because the mortgage was coming out of that. The credit cards were paid off of that. Everything came off of that bank 2, the fake paycheck account. And if that thing ever got down to 0, we had to move money from the funnel account. But that was a really easy way for both of us to look at each other and said, apparently we spent more than 6 this month.
Yeah, right.
So it was a set weekly transfer, and then you just watch the fake paycheck account to see how you did. Now, over time, we've had to move that number up, and that's fine. That at least you control what they call lifestyle creep. At least I'm aware of it.
Yep.
But if all that was in one account, I don't think I would be as aware. When Michelle, my wife, and I decide, all right, it's time to increase that to $2,000 a week or $2,500 a week, whatever that is, we made a conscious decision, and we are more aware of our lifestyle creep.
Yeah. Well, it's a great way to kind of pay yourself first, and like just making sure that you're allocating that separately. Because to your point, it's so easy to just swipe the card and be like, oh well, and not tracking like how much is in versus out.
Right.
It just becomes one. And I'm kind of going through that right now. It's like, you've got the credit cards with balances and different bank accounts, and it's like I think that's great advice.
Well, just real quick on the funnel account,
Yeah.
that's got to pay retirement savings. That's got to pay so what you do is the things that are behavioral you put on the second bank account. The things where you pay yourself first to put it away towards retirement, emergency fund, things like that. That's from the funnel account. That's how you force what you said about pay yourself first and then pay your fake paycheck.
Yeah, love it. And when it comes, you mentioned the Roth, like I think there's a lot of opinions out there about, I think people bash on the Roth, they bash on the 401k. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, specifically guys on social media, like don't ever do a 401k. It's the dumbest thing you've ever heard of. Buy a piece of real estate instead. But like, what are your thoughts on that? Like kind of you're doing a set amount every month into something like a retirement account versus saving up for a real estate deal or investing in a private fund or with a syndicator or something like that.
Yeah. I understand where they're coming from. Especially for people who take a hands-on approach to their investments, oftentimes have a lot of success with it. So it's hard, like I get where they're coming from totally.
Yeah.
If you get a match to your 401k, you have an immediate 100% return. Like if you get a 4% match on a 4% contribution, I don't know of another investment that guarantees 100% return day one. Now, the question is, can you invest in another real estate or something else or other fund or other small business and catch up the 100% return and then outpace it because you might be earning 15, 20, 30% on your investment over here? That's possible. I guess my thought is, why not do both? Why not diversify a bit? I'm finding, so we specialize in retirement planning and retirement income strategies. The best prepared retiree is the one that has multiple tax structures to pull from. So it's funny to me. It's like somebody arguing at the store whether or not you should be buying milk or bread. And it's like, well, it seems like you could have both and take both home from the grocery store. Like that would allow you a little more flexibility in what you're eating each day, right?
Yeah.
Same concept. Like when you're in retirement, let's talk through a case. We have people that have $200,000 of income, but because they have taxable accounts, like just regular brokerage accounts, maybe some real estate income, maybe other funds distributing cash flow, then they also have a traditional IRA or traditional 401k, a Roth IRA, Roth 401k. We can strategically decide exactly how much we're pulling from each of those and manage the marginal tax brackets at 10, 12%. And then instead of hitting the 22% tax bracket, maybe we go dip into their capital gains a little bit and we're paying 15% capital gains. And then maybe we decide, we're getting close to a Medicare limit now, or they need to have healthcare premiums, subsidies on healthcare premiums. Let's not do that anymore. Let's tap the Roth. You get the idea. We all the time see retirees at a 7 to 12% tax overall. And they might, and some of those people have $200,000 to $300,000 of income.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that's because they have what's called a concept of degrees of freedom, which is not my term. It was a CEO who was an engineer that taught me this. Degrees of freedom in his business is setting yourself up for future multiple future pathways. So degrees of freedom is setting up multiple future pathways, and that's the same idea. Having traditional, having Roth, having real estate, having brokerage portfolios that you could borrow against, liquidate, sell, add to, you have a lot of flexibility there. It allows you degrees of freedom so that in the future you can pivot, make changes, and do what you need to do. So I think there's a balance of having all or having a variety of them. I think a lot of people misunderstand portfolios like 401ks and Roths and traditional. They end up managing the investments inside poorly, and then they're surprised and they think that the account is the culprit when it's the investment inside the account. It'd be kind of like, buying a truck when you only need a coupe and then blaming the garage that it's sitting in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
It's the vehicle. It's not the garage. You don't need to
Right.
tear down the house and build a new garage because you just need to sell the truck and buy the sedan. But the investment is the thing you're parking inside. The account structure is the garage, right? So anyway, you get the idea. I think there's a benefit to having the degrees of freedom of multiple future pathways. I think there's a benefit to understanding better the tax structure of it. The reality, Chase, is most people get the Roth traditional conversation wrong. If you, and this is where we spent a whole hour on somebody else's, it was 90 days from retirement, and people listen to it. It's crazy, but it's a whole hour on Roth and traditional. The reality is if your tax rate is the same and your growth rate is the same, it actually doesn't matter whether you do either. Take an Excel file, throw in various returns in whatever order you want. If the tax rate at the beginning and the end is the same and the average growth rate over the whole time is the same end spendable amount, it doesn't matter.
Interesting.
So people get all like bent out of shape about this conversation. It's like the only thing that really matters is your tax rate going to be higher today or higher in the future? And you just pick to avoid the higher one. That's it.
Yep.
And then having a little bit in each allows you to control that a little bit more.
Yeah, such good advice. I love it, Zacc. Last couple of questions, and we'll wrap up. Is as a business owner, I guess what would be, and we talked a little bit about this, but like what would be a piece of advice that you would give to somebody stepping into that role, ownership, mentality, anything that you've taken away from your experience with Capita that you'd like to share?
Yeah, are you thinking more along the lines of the advice you would give to somebody who's in or getting into or already in it, or the advice as to whether or not you should get into it? Can you maybe clarify for me?
I guess, yeah, if they're in it already, I know, or
Okay.
they've made that decision, like, hey, I'm going
Okay.
to start my business, or I'm taking ownership of a business.
Okay. There are a lot of really smart people out there, and I'm just going to tell you some things that I've learned from other people that I think that people should know. Elon Musk I don't know if this was recently or a long time ago, but I recently saw an interview where he talked about a business owner, a business leader gets this crazy distillation of all of the most difficult problems, because if it wasn't the most difficult problem, the other people at the company would have already solved it. They wouldn't be talking to you about it. So you basically you are a filter for the worst, and you should probably be aware that that's what's coming. You've already made the decision. You're going to run a business. Accept the fact that what comes with that is a distillation of the worst problems possible, and you need to figure out how to get used to dealing with those and mentally accept that is your lot in life. So if you've got the right mentality, that's Elon Musk. Okay, so let's move on to the next person. Greg McKeown. He has a book called Essentialism, and his whole concept is less but better. And it is so fantastic that I stopped doing New Year's resolutions, and I just try to listen to that book once a year at the beginning of every year, because he is so spot on with how you organize life and how you basically should be saying no to just about everything, because only a few things truly matter. And that's his point, is less but better. And the reality is those who are non-essentialists, which I find myself in that camp too frequently, tend to do too many things poorly and not enough of one thing really well. So that is, I would say, your next step is to figure out how to be more of an essentialist. You've accepted the fact that your life is going to be difficult, then now you have to figure out how to be more of an essentialist. And then the next one would be, we talked about James Clear with Atomic Habits. His philosophy is create the environment for success so that willpower is not the determining factor of your success. If you are going to rely on your pure brute force and muscle strength for success, don't get me wrong, an entrepreneur needs it, but you need more than that, because that's not enough, right? Like, you also need the right environment. So if you can design your environment for success, a quick example he talks about in his book is, he said, if you want to learn how to play the guitar, don't put the guitar in a case in the basement in a closet. It needs to be on a stand, open, pick in between the strings with, some tab notes ready to go. And then you can easily pick it up, play for a few minutes, and you'll put it down. You're reducing the friction. You're creating the environment for success. Think about that within your business. And if you can figure out what's essential, and then you can design the environment around those things so that it works. I had a conversation with Cassie just the other day, and the two of us were trying to decide how to label certain things within our CRM. And we had this idea that we thought was good, and then we both asked each other, will we have to explain this to a new trainee, like a new person at our firm? Will we have to explain it? Or does the language we're using to describe it, is it so intuitive it doesn't even need an explanation? Meaning it eliminates the need for training. We designed the environment to just work. And the reality was at the moment it wasn't. It wasn't the right description because we would have had to remind every new employee, oh, when you see this, it means that. Well, then why aren't we labeling it that? Mm-hmm. So that's the idea of like design the environment. So if you're already in the seat, try to enjoy it as much as possible because it's too easy to get frustrated with all the stress that comes of dealing with difficult things. And remember that people are people and you love them and they're fantastic and you need them and they're amazing and you'll accomplish so much more with a variety of people because like Mike, like our business doesn't exist without a Mike and without a Cassie and without many other people at the firm. But they think so differently than I do, and it can be so frustrating at times. We just have to duke it out a bit, and that's the only way to be successful. So summarize. You've made a decision to have a difficult life. Accept it. You're going to be fine. Be an essentialist. Less but better. Design your environment, and remember that it is people working together who are different when you're upset at them. It's different people together that make things work well, rather than everybody thinking like you. And I think if you can work through that process over and over again in your mind, I think you'll be great.
Amazing. Seriously, so much good there and so much we could expound upon. But I'm gonna get that book tomorrow. Essentialism sounds like an awesome read.
Yeah,
so
it's
I'll
good
to get it
for sure.
Okay, last question, Zacc. We'll be done. When you think about success, we've talked a lot about business, talking about a lot about money and investments. But I guess like when you back up and think about how you want to measure your life, how are you thinking about life well lived and success? I guess how do you define that in your life?
Yeah. I told you I went to Westminster, mm-hmm. But before that I was at the U, and I had this professor, and it was so funny because I didn't see eye to eye with this professor on hardly anything, but he made us read. It was this business philosophy class, and in the class, it talked a little bit about Immanuel Kant, and then I learned a little bit more about him, that philosopher at Westminster. And the concept is really hard to understand, but I've tried to apply a few things. So basically, the idea is, and this is so layman's terms, this is not eloquent, but I'm going to lay it out. If everybody thought the way I'm thinking, if everybody acted the way I'm thinking, would the world be amazing or would it be awful? So that's like a philosophy that helps guide me around like contribution to the world and contribution to life. And we're going to get to success like as we measure it here. But and that is so not the way that Kant explains it. So much better. But that philosophy can't be applied to everything. So for example, if everyone decided they needed to be the president of a wealth management firm, the world would be awful, right? So yeah. you can't apply that to everything. But if everyone chose to take their skills, their talent, and create an environment that benefited the people around them, that mentality is applicable to everyone. And if everyone did that, it would be wonderful. If everyone cut in line, if everyone stole from each other, the world would be awful. So anyway, that to me is basically my idea around like success is impact. Like how many people can we help with a superior experience, giving them an easy button to financial success, and then not just an easy button, but an easy button that optimizes all the different aspects of financial planning, wealth management, and really life relationships. Because money is relationships eventually. Like it all boils down to like what you get to do with your family, with your people, with yourself, protecting your family, anyway. So impact. We have 2,300 households. Impact to me is 10,000. I'm not super stressed about like AUM or exact, fees and things like that. To me, it's more how many households can think, yeah, I'm safe financially. And it means that I get to spend time with my family. It means I get to go do these things. It means that and I'm not the type that's like, oh, you're going to have a private island. It's going to be amazing in retirement. Like, no, to me, most people, I think they just want to feel safe. And if I can get 10,000 households to feel safe, that's success. If I can get then 20,000 households to feel safe, that's success. To me, it's just keep going as long as we can to get that spread to as many people as possible. It's more of like a utilitarian, like how do we just spread that as wide as possible. That's success for me. And then of course, managing that's the professional side, right? But I don't know if you meant like on the professional side or like in life in general, but I would say not just equal, a greater part of that is not at the expense of like hanging out with my kids and spending time with them, hanging out with my wife and going on vacations. Like I coach my kids in soccer for a reason, which means I end up leaving work regularly before 5 o'clock. Like there's trade-offs there, but if we isolate it just to professional success, impact, helping as many people to feel safe about finances as possible. The other side is I just want to have a great relationship with my family and them to be good people and contribute to society and have a good relationship with them long term.
Love it. That's awesome. Well, no better way to end, Zacc. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. Zacc Call, everyone, to go check out his podcast, their podcast, Financial Call. Again, thank you for sharing your story. It's great.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to The Chase Hudson Show. If you liked what you heard, please leave me a review and subscribe to this podcast. Reviews really help us to find better guests and to improve the overall quality of the show. If you'd like to connect with me directly or want to learn more about investing in real estate, send me a DM on Instagram at @officialchasehudson. Again, we really appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.